Feeling swamped by AI? Episode 3 of The Resilient Entrepreneur shows you how to flip burnout into business boosting resilience.
You brought AI in to help, but 77% of workers say these tools have increased their workload. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound familiar to you, Lee?
Meant to save time instead. Instead, it's created like an arms race of artificial urgency. We used to ask whether tasks were worth doing or not, and now we ask whether we can do it faster.
A lot of leaders are saying that they're suffering from AI fatigue by the must-have tools that are now, I guess, showering down on them as such.
Yeah, I know that even in preparation for this podcast, we're always looking around, looking for new tools, and that itself can be a bit overwhelming.
I guess one of the things that AI is causing an increase in is burnout. And before we get into anything, I guess we should talk a little bit about what is burnout from your perspective.
Yeah, so burnout is a psychological term, isn't it? It's essentially a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by a prolonged exposure to some form of stress. When we talk about workplace burnout, it's obviously related to workplace stress. And that stress is usually when our tasks feel unmanageable, relentless, and sometimes meaningless. And there's a bit of a mismatch between the demands that are on us and the resources and the ability to cope.
That's interesting, that meaningless thing. So do you think that's something that a lot of businesses and cultures are suffering from at the moment?
I think they always have been, depending on roles and everything, but especially now, I think those where you're supposed to be having like an AI assistant, I think sometimes it can just feel like you've got a second AI boss that you're not maybe using the tools properly for.
How can AI help you overcome burnout? Let's have a little focus on that for a moment.
How AI is going to help with burnout, I think at the minute it's mostly contributing to it, right? It's contributing to that emotional exhaustion. It's cynical and a bit detached, and we don't care about as much, but we keep going, and we still have that stress and irritability. What do you think? How do you think it's going to help? I mean, I've got some tips to talk about later on about how we can help minimize AI stress and burnout. I'm not certain I've got a convincing argument for how it helps yet.
For me, I guess one of the things that I see that is potentially causing the burnout is because you can just end up using AI endlessly, right? So it produce output so quickly that it's very difficult for us to absorb. I know Elon Musk talked about one of our problems with AI at the moment is our bandwidth, right? We need a neuro connection to AI to be able to absorb the information that it's given us quickly enough. And I've found myself doing this. I can be using AI and then it's giving me a load of answers, and I've already got my website content that I was planning for that day, right? Or my blog content for that day. And it's come at me so quickly. I've done the work so quickly. It's very difficult for me to even go, oh, wow, I've done everything that I planned today. Now what should I do? It's realizing that, you could do a day's work in an hour using AI. But you've got to realize that, and then you've got to go, and bosses have got to be more accepting to this as well. Once the person's done their day's work, say they've done 7 hours worth of work in an hour because AI has increased that productivity, then how can you give them that time back to go and use it wisely? There was a school that I saw recently that is just using AI as teachers. Now, the AI models all their lessons to the kid, and it can interpret what the kid needs, the learning style. Here's the kicker of what AI does, right? It teaches them for about an hour of skills or knowledge or academia, I guess. And then for the rest of the time, it's giving them games and workshops and exercises to do in terms of life skills. Now, we've mentioned that, right? But we've
Mhm.
talked very heavily in the previous episode about empathy. And that really don't. So if AI is teaching that way, it's going, right, I've taught you everything that you need to know from an academic perspective, here's some knowledge for you to be able to regurgitate on a test at some point. Now go and practice some life skills. And it shows these videos of them all interacting, all doing like interesting science experiments with one another and that kind of stuff. One of the biggest things we need to realize how much we're getting done in such a short period of time due to AI, and then utilize that time to potentially go and relax, meditate, some mindfulness, right? And
Yeah,
that's the bit that I think a lot of people are missing out.
I mean, you covered quite a lot there. The first thing I'd say is that you just said that maybe you can get 7 hours worth of work done in an hour, but that's because that 7 hours worth of work used to take you 7 hours. Whereas if it only takes you 1 hour now, have you done a day's work?
But that's the
Or,
changing mindset, right?
or should your boss expect you to do seven lots of that?
No, well, to me, that's where I think personally, that's where we need to build resilience in ourselves and in what we're being asked to do and what we're being willing to do as well. And we need to use that discipline and self-awareness to go and do this kind of practicing other stuff, this life affirming stuff like mindfulness, like meditation, like go and take a walk out in nature, go and read a
Yeah,
book, but
yeah.
utilize that time not to Netflix and chill, but to grow our own minds. Maybe we can increase our resilience to the overwhelming world which we live in. Which reminds me, I guess we've not actually also, so we've touched on what burnout is, but we haven't really talked much about what resilience is. And is resilience on the increase or decrease in society at the moment?
Is there a difference in generations? I think there certainly is. You know, resilience is the ability to bounce back, right, from stress, from setbacks, or from change, and to grow stronger in that process. So it's about being flexible, self-aware, and able to recover when life knocks you off balance. So we've all got resilience to some degree or another. It's a bit like psychological elasticity. You don't break, but you will bend, and you'll be able to manage with that. It's a bit like duct tape, right? It's not flashy, it's not perfect, but incredibly useful if things fall apart. Higher or lower? I think it's probably just changed a bit. What do you think?
For me, I imagine that we have far less resilience now compared to we did, say, in World War Two. Hell on earth for a lot of people. Even if you just take rationing, for example, those times must have been solidly difficult, right? Compared to what they are today. Those difficult times built more resilience. Now, anecdotally, Gen Z, right, and Gen Alpha are definitely known. Back in my day, right, when all this was fields, there was no such term as snowflake. That much I can tell you, right? That is fact. We never had the term snowflake. Nobody referred to us as snowflakes. No generation was referred to as snowflakes. Nobody knew what the word snowflake meant. And yet today, it's an everyday used term, right, to a lot of people. You go
Yeah.
out there and say snowflake, most people, I would bet, I might be wrong, but I would say most people are going to know exactly what you're talking about.
I think you're right there. I think resilience is almost a more modern word as well. I think in times gone by, we maybe would have referred to it as stoicism or grit, you know, the
Yeah.
stiff upper lip. Resilience is more of a psychological description of does that mean there's less of it? Yeah, I mean, my view is not. I think you've got different generations labeling things differently.
Would you not measure the increase in ill health, mental health, as a sign that resilience isn't as high as what it once was? Or are we just diagnosing things more?
I think there's a double whammy: overdiagnosis and sort of cheap soft overdiagnosis. Do you think there's a slight difference with how the modern generations respond to a diagnosis? I think sometimes there is a desire to use the diagnosis as an explanation for why they are as they are, or why they behave as they do, or why they act as they do, when actually the purpose of a diagnosis is to point at solutions of how to improve any behavioral issues that are occurring or any motivational issues that are occurring. And I think there is a more modern issue with the younger generations where it's used as a shield to say, well, no,
Right.
you have to accept me as I am, rather than actually this explains why I am how I am. What can I do to improve how I can handle it? I think that's relevant when it comes to resilience, and maybe how people are using those labels as a defense rather than an instruction on how to do things better.
Certainly, I would say from my coaching experience, I see a lot more defense using coming up in the mentoring I've done with young people through the Prince's Trust. I hear a lot of excuses like, I would have done that, but, and I would say that I've come across an anecdotal, I've used that word several times saying that, but it is anecdotal. It's not statistical causation. It's more of a correlation of people using wooden leg syndrome as a reason for not getting things done.
You touched on productivity, and I think another reason why some of the things don't get done in that way is when it comes to these AI tools and potentially the overwhelm that comes with them. We're used to choosing between good and bad, aren't we? Is what's a good way of doing something, what's a bad way of doing something. Whereas what we're finding with AI, you've got about 400 different tools that are all probably fine. You know, neither are brilliant, neither are the best yet. We just don't know. They're all probably fine, yet we do the same thing 2 or 3 times with a different tool just to see what it gives me. And it's actually, is that useful? Is that a good use of my time? Or actually, have I just introduced another source of potential stresses that are going to lead to burnout and me having to try and lean back on my resilience.
Yeah, I think it's very tempting to just like use multiple tools. A lot of people don't invest in the tools these days, right? So they just use one free tool to another free tool. Even though a lot of these things are just the price of a Costa coffee, they try and get away with just using a free tool all the time. And what happens with that, the problem with that is that each free tool has limitations, right? So to make your thing work well is in the paid version. Thus, I end up bouncing between two tools on that. I would have probably saved time, and that time that would have saved me money as well at the same time. So I
And
would
I think,
say, like, I have been tempted. I'm quite invested in ChatGPT, and often you'll hear me talk about ChatGPT. But then I see a video, and somebody tells me that Claude's just had an upgrade, and Claude has got a new model, and now Claude is working well, right? So you're tempted to then hop into another AI model.
yeah.
But the thing is, that AI model doesn't know me as well as the ChatGPT does because I've spoke so much to ChatGPT, so it's
Yeah,
learned a lot about me and my personality.
yeah, exactly. You've taught it bits, but instead of relying on that, there's a new shiny object over there that gets our attention, right? And this is a feeling that I think a lot of people have, even if they know roughly what they're doing with it, even if they feel like it's helped their productivity, you're potentially just in a bad race, right? People feel like if you haven't got the latest plugin, that it's not going to work. It's not going to work well, but actually, it, that finish line is never there, right? There's new tools all of the time. You want to make sure that the tools that you're using are being used for a specific goal. And I think too often we're using the tools to see if we can meet a goal.
Tell me a little bit more
Uh,
about this.
and you talked about young people and are they more or less resilient? And actually, when we used to do a job, if you said you did a web, you could do a website in an hour, whereas before it might have taken you 7 hours. Is that satisfying? Do you
Yes.
enjoy? Is it? Do you enjoy it
Uh,
as much as when you've done a whole day's work and at the end of it you can go, "Hey, look, I've actually got something." In the old days, I'd write a blog. It might take me a day. I can write 10 blogs in 5 minutes now.
yeah.
Who's reading them? Who's enjoying them? Is anyone? I'm not enjoying making them.
No,
That
I get
that's
your point.
so productivity is up, but enjoyment is down, and that's where loss of meaning. That helpful work that I do suddenly feels a bit hollow because there's so much input with no effort and no time. That's not necessarily the right way of looking at it, right? I had to know what to ask the AI. I had to check that what it gave me was accurate. Is that as rewarding? Sometimes producing those 10 blogs can feel incredibly unrewarding.
I imagine if I was a journalist, for example, I used to spend several months researching and investigating a story, and then that story finally got published. It'd be like working at the gym for several months and then getting the muscles, and then the muscles being the evidence of all my hard work. So there is that bit there where it's like actually the just getting their things instantly, and we kind of alluded to this in the last podcast as well. That getting things instantly can kill the satisfaction of it. I never wanted to be building websites, right? I never got into business to build websites. I got into business to help people solve problems, and I got into business to help people have better lives. Now, so I want to get the blogs done. I want to get them published, and I want to get them out there to hopefully increase some SEO content, show me authority, and show my credibility in the place that I work in my industry. If the blog does that, do I care how long it took to write? Not really. What I want to be doing is I want to be coaching people. I want to be talking to people and helping them solve their problems. If I was a writer, then yes, AI is going to kill that satisfaction, right? Because I got into writing because I love writing. Same with songwriting. If I'm a songwriter and it just produces me a song and it produces me a hit, then yes, I see what you're saying. That song is it's not gonna come from the heart, right? And it's not gonna have that love put into it, and somebody will probably pick up on that anyway, and it probably won't be a hit. But a lot of us definitely didn't get into doing social media posts. A lot of entrepreneurs spend their time doing social media posts because it makes them feel like they're being productive, right? Whereas
Yeah.
based on what their business is, what they should probably be doing is writing an email directly to a potential customer and saying, look, I can do this for you. Would you like my business? But actually,
you've just nailed it. Yeah. You've nailed it, Martin. Because one of the I've got 3 burnout truths in the age of AI, right? And one of them is burnout isn't just overwork; it's under clarity. And you've just clarified that for you, AI has enabled you to take the tasks that you didn't used to find as enjoyable and get them done quicker to achieve what the goal is. And that's kind of what I was talking about. So when it comes to burnout and AI, I don't think people are just exhausted from doing too much. I think they're exhausted from not knowing what matters. And I experience this sometimes as well. AI is adding noise. It's giving us more options. It's giving us more tools and more pressure to keep up. And sometimes we end up drowning, not in the tasks themselves, but in the ambiguity about which tasks we should be using. And I think that's kind of what you were just talking about. So one of my solutions for that is define what the outcome needs to be before you use the tools. And I sometimes jump in, find a tool and go, how can this tool help me? And I'll ask the tool. And actually, that's the wrong way around. We need to be going in and having a good idea what we want. So we want to go from under clarity to really crystal clear focus so that we avoid that ambiguity, exhaustion, and the drowning in the what now. Go with the why first. Before adding another AI tool, ask what exactly do you want to achieve with it? And set some clear priorities on how urgent it is and what needs to be done. And then try and use the AI as a laser pointer, not a floodlight. And I think a lot of us at the minute are using AI as floodlights to illuminate everything. If we take the AI properly and go, what do I really need to know? What do I want more information about? And get AI to do that, then that is really one very helpful way of doing it. So clarity will reduce that cognitive load, which means that there'll be less fatigue and better decisions. And that helps to reduce burnout.
Okay, yeah, I think like one of the key things I wrote it down there is he just says, not knowing what matters. That is potentially a fundamental problem in today's world, right? I think I did a video about this earlier on as well on my TikTok. I was talking about when I was a kid, sometimes I would say to my mum, I'm bored, mum, and she would say, you're bored, I'll give you something to do. And actually, you know what, on reflection, and I wouldn't want any of the things that she was going to give me for starters, right? None of us do. We've all been there. What was actually the problem was, I had too much choice of what I could do, right? I was very lucky. I was very privileged. I had a computer. I had computer games on that. I had books. I had a bike, right? So I could go out on my bike. I could read a book. I could play my computer things, right? I had Lego. I had things like that to do. So I actually had so much things to do. I couldn't choose what to do.
Yeah, you weren't bored at all. You were overwhelmed by all of the options, and you didn't know how to accurately define your problem, and you wanted someone else to solve it for you.
If I'd clearly defined my goal, I can clearly define my quickest and most efficient route to get to that goal. And yes, I think you're absolutely right with that floodlight analogy. A lot of people go into AI not really knowing what it is they want AI to do. Whereas if they set their goal and their desired outcome before they got into AI, then that would guide them a lot better when they come to use the AI. And that would hopefully turn down the burnout as well. Have you got any other top tips about how you potentially reduce burnout in the AI world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you just commented on there really leads into the next one. So I don't think this sense of feeling behind is going to go away. I think it's like a new anxiety that we're going to have. With AI evolving daily, I think we're going to pay an emotional tax on never really feeling caught up. And that's not really a feeling of laziness. It's almost a chronic alertness to the fact that there isn't a finish line.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we're going to have to learn to handle. And I don't think we're quite ready for that yet. But I think we need to reframe the race. You don't have to do it all of the time. We need to practice sort of a strategic neglect, if you like. Identify what not to do. That is as important as identifying what to do. And I think that's really important. And as part of doing that, you need to schedule a mental downtime so that you get away from the internet. So if I was going to summarize that, it's an acceptance of the limits, right? It's not defeat, it's emotional self-care. You can't do all of it. But
the ultimate finish line in life is death, right? So let's not be in a rush to get there too quick.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, AI can help, right? But we need boundaries with our bots. We've got to not let them haunt us, really. The temptation to optimize all the time is ultimately going to lead us to decision fatigue. It's going to lead us to task blurring and creative burnout. If AI becomes the boss, then we've misused that assistant, haven't we?
Any other tips for reducing burnout?
I think it's recognizing that AI isn't the villain, isn't it? If we constantly try to adopt it and use it, then that's not going to be that helpful for us. Instead, we want to out clarify, we want to have clear boundaries, and we want to out feel it.
Yeah.
I mean, the one of the other things I would suggest that we do is start asking the right questions of ourselves as well. Recognize if we're experiencing burnout, recognize if our resilience is struggling. What sort of questions might we ask? Am I always on but never present? So are you answering emails at midnight but you don't know what you had for lunch? Other things that used to energize you now draining you. So the tasks, the people, or the passions that you once had, do they now feel like admin? Is there a general loss of joy and emotional flatness? Are you confusing activity with progress? I'm doing stuff all day, but I'm finishing nothing meaningful. Am I numbing or avoiding? Burnout often hides under the illusion of research. I'm researching this, I'm looking at this. Is there a lack of clarity? When did you last feel clear? If you're answering yes to any of these questions, then really you should be perhaps looking at doing some form of assessment, which I have available for you. We'll put a link up somewhere for the burnout test to see what burnout level you're at. If rest feels lazy and if joy feels indulgent, then you're probably already too far gone with burnout and ought to be.
And I guess the important message in there is you can do something about it, right? It's never too late. That's the important message.
I mean, it's never too late and it's never too early, right? The later you leave it, the harder it is. So if you are already experiencing burnout, then it will be harder to correct it. If you're starting to recognize some symptoms of burnout, the sooner you start to identify what those issues are, the sooner you start to talk to someone if need be, the sooner that happens, the better. But again, I don't know, Martin, I think people are avoiding wanting to know whether they're burned out. Okay. There is still a stigma that stops people doing that. Now, part of that stigma is, like you just said, not knowing that help is available, right? Help is available, whether you're stressed, depressed, anxious, burned out, help is available and it does work, but you can't possibly know you need it unless you measure it. And that's a big campaign I'm trying to run to try and get people to look at their own mental health. You don't have to do anything else to start with, and if you sit there and you're saying, well, I don't need that, then good. I'm really glad. But actually, by the time somebody gets around to thinking, I do need that, actually it's, the ship has sailed partly. It's going to take you twice as long to deal with the problem. So actually, if we start assessing when we're well, it will help us to spot earlier when perhaps we're becoming unwell and can do something about it in a much easier time frame.
Yeah, people aren't kind enough to their mind, right? And there's still this thing that holds back, and we're going to need to close today's podcast before we wrap on for far too long. But this is really important stuff. I think for me, mentally, a lot of people still don't realise that their brain needs to work out, that their physical body needs to work out. And it's much easier to stay fit than it is to get fit, right? So it's much easier to keep your body in condition.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to stay
and it builds resilience by being aware of your mental health, by spotting areas where maybe you've got some poorer habits. You can start to work on those, and that helps to build your resilience. That helps to help you manage when things inevitably go wrong, and they will go wrong. And the strongest people, the most resilient people, will be really resilient right up until the point that resilience fails. And it doesn't matter how resilient you are, if certain life circumstances come up, you will struggle.
Oh, so wrapping up today's session, as from what we've been through, first of all, if you're part of the 77% of workers that have had AI tools increase their workload but reduce their productivity, then probably one of the things that we're saying today is that you're not unusual, you're not on loan, but what you need to do is think about what your goals and what your outcomes are, and that will help you be laser focused as opposed to floodlight. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you tune in for the next one. Please make sure to subscribe, follow and like and share this with your family and friends so that more people get to enjoy the Resilient Entrepreneur.